These watchers, transgressing their mandate, committed atrocities upon the human race. After their destruction, the Nephilim spirits were believed to wander the earth as demons, restless and malevolent, and forever cut off from both heaven and earth. And then we venture into the realm of the Fae. But traditions hold that the Fae are remnants of some kind of ancient pre-human race, displaced by the coming of humanity and the rise of new gods. This mythic pattern repeats in the concept of the homunculus and the clone, artificial beings created by human hands, one through alchemical ritual and the other through genetic science. Both are attempts to replicate the divine acts of creation, to engineer life, to produce a hybrid that transcends natural boundaries. In the posthuman vision, humanity itself becomes the experimenter, the new Anunnaki.
Please observe this special announcement from our beloved ghost.
Tell him, I'm not gay no more. I am delivered. Now, listen, y'all praise God with him. Hold on, wait a minute. Somebody believe God with him. Hey!
What's going on, everybody? It's your ghost, John. Just here with another banger. Listen, if y'all are listening to me on Spotify, you guys rock, because, wow. For a long time, YouTube had you guys beat, but I'm telling you, I've been looking at the numbers, and we're basically getting quadruple the work done over on Spotify. So good job, and thank you all. And honestly, there's a couple of you guys who comment on almost every video. Some of your comments are kind of on the ruder side, and some of them are not, but they all make me think. So I especially also appreciate you guys who are continuing to comment on Spotify specifically, especially also YouTube, of course YouTube as well. But traditionally, this has been an area where Spotify was lacking, but now, man, you guys are a regular gang over there. So thank you. YouTube, still love you. That's why you guys get all the weird stuff, right? But yeah, anyway. Fairies aren't just these whimsical beings dancing on flowers. Their origins kind of trace deeper into ancient folklore, especially in Celtic, Germanic, and Scandinavian traditions. They were initially, of course, revered as like guardians of nature and spirits of the departed. Fairies were deeply connected with ancient mysteries, sometimes identified with unbaptized souls or forgotten ancient races. But as Christianity swept across Europe, perceptions of fairies shifted dramatically. The church, which was intent on eradicating pagan beliefs, began portraying fairies as sort of deceptive, malevolent entities, no better than demons. And who can really say for sure whether they are or aren't demons, right? But fairy encounters were condemned as witchcraft in those days, leading many to persecutions and trials. Very suddenly, the boundary between fairy magic and demonic influence began to blur. Now, consider the eerie powers that are attributed to fairies. When I say, who can say if they are not demons? They do have these bizarre powers that demons also seem to possess at certain times. They've got the ability to shapeshift, invisibility, elemental control. Their unpredictable nature mirrors demonic entities who, throughout history, have offered tempting deals with these hidden, devastating costs. The folklore abounds, as we all know, with tales of humans being lured into fairy bargains, these generous offers that quickly spiral into nightmares, which echo the dark pacts that are traditionally associated with demons, making deals with the devil and all that kind of stuff. During the medieval and the early modern periods, this overlap intensified. Stories of changelings who were these children believed to be replaced by fairy imposters. They mirror the descriptions of possession and supernatural interference. Both fairies and demons were believed to be capable of influencing or even controlling human minds, causing madness at times or granting forbidden knowledge in other times. And even exorcism practices reveal that there is this kind of sinister overlap. Methods such as holy water, iron, and prayers used against demons were equally employed to repel fairies. Even when I went to Iceland, some of you guys were like, make sure you bring a horseshoe because of the iron thing and all of the fae type that are allegedly in Iceland. The Catholic Church developed very clear signs of demonic possession: superhuman strength, speaking unknown languages, an aversion to sacred objects. These signs were frequently attributed to fairy encounters too. Today, while demonic possession kind of remains within religious and psychological frameworks, at least that's what the public would have you believe, or the powers that be would have you believe, there are still communities that interpret fairy experiences as genuine spiritual intrusions. Psychological symptoms like hallucinations and personality changes or dissociation. These things, which are often lumped under this sort of umbrella definition of the mental health crisis, they could actually be demonic influence. And I know that's kind of like a medieval thing to say, but I think that in order to pretend that the influence of demons does not exist, we have mislabeled some medical conditions. Not all of them, but some of them. And I think that they used to be attributed to supernatural influences. Now they just receive these strange mental health diagnoses. Let's compare the two clearly: fairies and demons. Fairies are these kind of ancient pagan spirits tied to nature and the dead. They're generally considered unpredictable and morally ambiguous, and they often are involved in kidnappings and mysterious, costly bargains. Demons are primarily rooted in Christian theology, and they are purely malevolent beings, explicit in their intent, and they seek souls through temptation and possession. The line between fairies and demons is historically fluid, shifting with all these cultural tides. Modern fascination with supernatural encounters continues this tradition, and this whole situation prompted me to search for modern interactions with fairies, and it turns out that there are a ton of people who believe that they're still interacting with fairies to this day, but not everybody is going to come out with their loudest voice and say that, because, I mean, listen to how it sounds. But perhaps fairies and demons aren't so different after all, just varied faces we give to the timeless fear and allure of the supernatural. And if so, then when we speak of looking for the enemy, or where is this great battle, where are all the demons if there are so many, it kind of begins to make sense, starting in the ancient past all the way up to now. The persistence of fairy belief, even after the spread of Christianity, is partly due to the way folk traditions and religious beliefs coexisted and sometimes even blended. While the church did not really endorse fairy belief and often condemned it, people continued to share stories and perform rituals related to fairies, treating them as a sort of parallel system of supernatural explanation. In some cases, fairies were reimagined as these fallen angels or spirits who occupied a space between good and evil. But beyond cultural tradition, fairy tales and beliefs also fulfill psychological needs. They connect people to emotions and hopes and fears that are pretty hard to express in daily life. And so that's kind of where science latches on and says that these ideas offer a sense of wonder to these types of people, adventure and meaning. Fairy tales and legends, they say, serve as these kind of metaphors for personal challenges and growth, reflecting this universal human experience and the desire to kind of find magic or meaning beyond the ordinary. And in that way, they turn what seems like a legitimate, horrifying encounter, they turn it into a Disney movie. That's how they do it. That's the game. But of course, it's also completely possible in my mind that fairies could be demons. They are certainly demonic. The things that fairies do don't typically seem to align with the things that good angels do. But we can definitely draw parallels between the Fae and folklore and the Nephilim. For instance, both Fae and the Nephilim are depicted as beings who exist in this sort of intersection of the human and the supernatural. In European folklore, fairies are often described as these ancient, powerful, and sometimes capricious entities. They're neither fully divine nor fully mortal, and they inhabit this parallel world, a world parallel to ours. They are credited with supernatural abilities, extraordinary beauty, or stature, and they are given this tendency and this ability to meddle in human affairs, sometimes for good reasons, but often for ambiguous or bad reasons. And that in turn brings about these pretty dangerous consequences sometimes, including abductions and murder. So the Nephilim, as described in Genesis 6:1-4 and expanded upon in the book of Enoch, are the offspring of the sons of God, interpreted by many as these divine or angelic beings. And they are also the sons of human women, because these fallen angels took women, similar to the Fae, who also like to abduct. And they're characterized by their extraordinary size and their strength, and of course, their moral ambiguity or outright corruption in general. So, like the Fae, the Nephilim are these liminal beings, hybrids whose existence blurs the boundary between the divine and the mortal. There's no good Nephilim. By the very way that they are evil, similar to the Fae. Both traditions also connect these beings to some kind of lost pre-flood or pre-Christian world, a time when the boundaries between the human and the supernatural were more porous. The Nephilim are said to have lived before the flood, and according to some interpretations, they even survived it, appearing later as giants, as legendary figures in the land of Canaan. And of course, we see them as demigods and monsters and people like, or entities like Hercules and Medusa, and all of these legends from the past may actually be stories of these Nephilim, these fallen angels, or as they've come to be known in the secular universe, these Fae. Similarly, fairies are often imagined as remnants of an ancient race, displaced by the coming of Christianity or the rise of humankind, which also makes sense in a demonic perspective. I imagine that some demons did just escape into the wilderness. Another parallel is their ambiguous moral status. Fairies in older traditions could be helpful or harmful, beautiful or monstrous. That movie that Shyamalan just put out, what was it called? The Watchers.
The fairy kind of lore is really wonderful because it's this like coexistence of darkness and beauty that really resonated with me as a child. So to be able to kind of think about what they would be like in today's world was just a dream.
The Watchers are the tricks that your mind can play with you, the addiction that you wish you could drop, the obsession that you wish you could let go of.
There's always a place for the fairy tale, even in the modern world. Like all those notions of monsters come from a fear of the unknown.
The beautiful part about fairy tales and stuff is the darkness underneath it. And Al really reminded me of all of that by making it a genre piece.
It's just got all of the ingredients it needs to be the perfect horror.
Shauna and the designers of the creature have spent months and months talking through how they move, how they get up, how do they change, and that's scary too. This uncanny valley aspect of their transformation is very disturbing.
We wanted to be sure to capture human motion so that we can put that into the creature.
We looked at this form of dance called Buto, which is this really beautiful kind of Japanese dance of death. And so that was like a big inspiration for us with all of the dancers and movement artists.
Ashana described the pain they felt in the movement. She really wanted to show that they are constantly in pain, no matter what movement they're making from being held in these really uncomfortable positions underground, that they are now these decrepit creatures that you wanted to get across.
One of the biggest things we tried to achieve was making sure that these watchers came across with personality and emotion and feeling and purpose driven, not just a CG creature that's just walking in the background or does a throwaway action. We really emphasized, purpose and movement.
We want to sympathize with them a little bit, I think, in certain parts. But then they're also vicious.
To him, that movie's about fairies. But if you guys watch that movie, you can see some biblical parallels to Nephilim there. It's pretty crazy. And I don't know if he did that intentionally or not, but you guys should go watch it just to look for the biblical parallel to the Nephilim and the Watchers and the fairies. Because actually, now that I'm thinking about it, that movie is such a great thing to watch in conjunction with this episode. So if you can find it, go watch it. I don't recommend it because it's a great movie. I just recommend it because it's pretty cool in reference to what we're talking about. Anyway, another thing that aligns the Fae with the Watchers or with the Nephilim is they would impart forbidden knowledge. This trait is echoed in the Nephilim, who in the Book of Enoch teach humanity charms, enchantments, and forbidden arts, leading to corruption and calamity. The Watchers and the Nephilim were continuing to guide the human race along. The mythical DNA of both groups appear to draw from even older sources as well. Ancient Mesopotamian myths, such as the Epic of Gilgamesh. It features these demigods and hybrid beings, part divine and part human, who possess great power and wisdom, but also bring about chaos and ultimately some kind of divine retribution. Biblical authors may have deliberately recast these regional myths. I'm not sure, but the Fae are never mentioned in the Bible. They could have been transforming celebrated culture heroes into symbols of corruption and warning when they wrote the Bible, just as fairy lore in Europe evolved from veneration to suspicion and fear with the rise of new religious paradigms, or the Fae just were always misconstrued as demons, and the people who wrote the Bible didn't think of the Fae as Fae because they knew they were demons. Or maybe none of this entered into their minds at all. Who could say for sure? In summary, though, both Fae and Nephilim function as mythic intermediaries between worlds. They both embody the dangers and allure of contact with the supernatural. Their stories serve as cautionary tales about the consequences of crossing boundaries, whether between human and divine or between just normal life and practicing magic. The persistence of these motifs across cultures and millennia suggests that they do in fact spring from a shared human fascination of some kind of other being, with beings who are like us but not, and whose existence challenges the very boundaries of reality itself. The parallels are so strong that one could argue these are not just coincidental similarities. Maybe they are different cultural expressions of the same thing. But I began to think, because I once heard somebody also compare the Fae to an entity called the Igigi. In Sumerian and Akkadian mythology, the Igigi were a group of deities who included the Anunnaki, who you may have heard about before, and we've spoken about them in the context that they're somehow related to the Watchers. Some people think they are the Watchers. Some people think they're the Nephilim. Some people think that the Watchers and the Anunnaki are completely separate. But now, the Igigi have been mentioned throughout ancient texts, including the Sumerian creation epic Enuma Elish and the hymn of Enlil. And these stories describe the great gods as both groups of deities and the offspring of Anu, the sky god, and Ki, the earth goddess. In fact, as part of their function, many of the gods in the Igigi group serve to sort of maintain this balance for the other gods that are on earth. One common theme throughout these deities, though, refers to them as beings who are associated with the underworld. For example, while some scholars believe that they are thought of as divine beings who inherit the earth after their parents died, and some think they came from like the rings of Saturn and stuff like that, others think that they were divine beings who maintained order among the humans in their world. I think it was Zechariah Stitchin who said that there are basically our slave masters or something like that, and they came from outer space. They're aliens. In Babylonian mythology, they were 7 or 8 judges of the underworld. The Igigi were also gatekeepers, guardians of heaven and earth. Their original purpose was probably to serve as attendants to the old gods, after which they became priests themselves. Interestingly, though, the name Igigi was also believed to mean Great Earth. I find that kind of coincidental, since the Fae are technically considered like earth spirits, components of Mother Earth. So it's interesting that Igigi has a parallel there. The Igigi were also described as having long beards and long hair that reached their feet. And some scholars have postulated that the Igigi were like the biblical angels in a way. They were messengers of the gods who had wings. And these theories are strengthened by art that often depicts them with long beards and hair, as well as these large wings and bird-like feet. Of course, there's ongoing debate about the connections between like the Anunnaki, the Watchers, and the Nephilim, and the Igigis, and I'm not taking any sides here, especially since many traditions, including my personal view, interpret these entities as faces of demons or lowercase g gods. The Nephilim, on the other hand, they are described in Genesis and Enoch as the offspring of these Watchers and human women, as we already said. And from them, this race of giants, these men of renown, whose existence was one of the reasons for the flood, came to be. So in this framework, the Anunnaki and the Watchers would be the same exact group, while the Nephilim are their hybrid descendants. That would be the Fae. And a lot of you guys know that I look at myths and fables as just different sources of history, of obviously painted beautifully, but different faces of history. According to Genesis 6:4, it was the race that followed, the Nephilim, that prompted God's decision to destroy all flesh by flooding the earth. Enoch, who was the 7th from Adam, prophesies about these men. See, the Lord is coming with thousands upon thousands of his holy ones to judge everyone and to convict all of them of all the ungodly acts that they have committed in their ungodliness, and of all the defiant words ungodly sinners have spoken against him. And that's Jude 14 through 15. It's important to realize that the first humans in Genesis chapter 1 were also vastly different from their descendants in chapter 6. They lived for hundreds of years before death came upon them. They lived during a time when the sons of God came unto humans and produced these offspring that were giants. And these giants, these men of old, were no ordinary human beings. As far as we can tell, they had remarkable physical strength, extraordinary abilities and knowledge, supernatural, and great longevity as well. They had extended lifespans compared to us today. They didn't believe that they would die like one of us, as is portrayed in Ezekiel 28:7, because they did indeed live longer than normal humans. Their DNA was some kind of hybridized version which gave them these traits. When this race of horrors was inevitably wiped out during the Great Flood, did they become spirits and begin to crawl the earth like invisible beasts, hiding in every nook and cranny? Because that would make a lot of sense when you think about the Fae worshipping cultures that came after the flood. It makes a lot of sense to think of these beings as demonic forest entities who escaped the wiping out of the flood, the Fae, instead of Nephilim. But before the flood, there was no concept of the Fae. Another interesting cryptid with Fae adjacent qualities, which actually appears to be more of an incredibly gifted and dangerous human type entity, is the Skinwalker. To analytically explore the possible connections between the Fae of European folklore and the Skinwalkers of Navajo tradition, we have to look beyond surface level similarities, because I know a lot of you guys are like, what? They're not at all similar. But if we delve into the deeper mythological, psychological, and anthropological patterns that underpin both entities, they, yes, arise from vastly different cultures and environments, but they do have recurring motifs and behaviors and societal roles. Both Fae and Skinwalkers are liminal beings. They exist on the boundaries between the human world and the supernatural. The Fae inhabit the other world, right? A realm parallel to ours, accessible only at certain times or under specific conditions or next to a certain mushroom or something like that. Skinwalkers are believed to move between the human and animal realms, crossing the boundaries of identity and form at will. This ability to traverse worlds is central to their power and, of course, also to their danger. And one of the most striking similarities, at least to me, is the power of shape-shifting. I think that is a pretty big tip-off that these things are related in some way. Fae are notorious for their ability to assume a myriad of forms, animals and humans, or even inanimate objects. This echoed in the Navajo Skinwalker, who is a witch capable of transforming into wolves, coyotes, birds, or even mimicking the appearance and voice of other people. It almost sounds like somebody possessed by a fae, somebody possessed by a demon. The Skinwalker's transformation is often achieved through the donning of animal pelts. And this is also mirrored in European tales, where fae or witches use enchanted garments or objects to change shape. But this is not unique to these two cultures either. In comparative folklore, shape-shifting magicians or witches appear globally. They're all over the place. We have the Norse berserkers, African were hyenas. We have the Indian were tigers and Celtic selkies. All of these reflect the same fascination with the ability to cross the boundaries of species and self, an ability that these forest demons seem to be able to provide to people. Skinwalkers, meanwhile, are almost always malevolent, but their origins are complex. They often come from former healers or spiritual guides who have chosen to use their powers for evil, typically after committing some kind of grave taboo, such as the murder of a family member. This transformation from healer to harmer is echoed in many Fae stories, where fairies or witches were once benevolent spirits or wise women, later demonized by changing cultural or religious attitudes. Even the changelings are like, they're sometimes described as like these old babies almost. Like they're like old men, but they're like babies at the same time. It's disgusting. But in both cases, these beings become outcasts, operating outside the moral order of society, and they're deeply feared for their ability to transgress boundaries, whether between life and death, human and animal, or good and evil. In Navajo culture, even just speaking about skinwalkers is taboo, and it's believed to attract their attention or bring misfortune to you. It's like the vampire idea, where you let them in. It's very similar with the skinwalker. Similarly, in many Celtic and European traditions, people avoided speaking the true names of the Fae. They would use euphemisms instead, like the good people, to avoid drawing the punishments of the Fae, as they believed they were being subjected to. And numerous stories reinforce these parallels. In Navajo lore, the skinwalkers are described as moving with supernatural speed, mimicking voices to lure victims, and exuding a sort of stench of rot and sulfur. In European folklore, Fae are known for their enchanting music, their powers to lead travelers astray, and their association with strange odors or sudden chills. All of these things sound demonic to me. Both are said to abduct humans. Skinwalkers sometimes possess or replace their victims, while Fae are infamous for stealing children and leaving changelings in their place. There are paranormal reports from North America sometimes describing encounters with shape-shifting human-animal hybrids in remote places. Stories that, depending on the teller's background, might be labeled as skinwalkers or Fae. And it's not just the US. We see this kind of stuff all over the place. In the Middle East is very popular too. Even the stories, when you listen to some of the stories, you could almost replace the name Skinwalker with the name Fae, or vice versa. There's this story about a Navajo man who recounted seeing a Skinwalker run alongside his car at some kind of impossible speed, and its form was shifting between animal and human at the same time. He said he could smell a foul stench, and it was even mimicking voices. And then in Irish folklore, you have almost like the opposite, but still sinister. There's this story of a traveler who was led astray by a beautiful woman, who then transforms into a hare, a rabbit, and then vanishes, leaving the man totally lost and disoriented. And that's described as classic Fae behavior. In both cases, these beings can be encountered at night, in liminal spaces, and such as like roads or forests, and they both leave the witnesses profoundly unsettled, sometimes sick, cursed, or maybe just never to be seen again. It's interesting how in the past, people could have open discussion of these things as things that may actually exist. But now, to believe in such things, you sort of get placed firmly under the grip of what the public and what scientific journals call the mental health crisis. The thing that I thought was pretty interesting was that in the United States, over half of the population reportedly believed absolutely in demons, with an additional 20% saying that, yeah, it's actually possible. I don't know if I believe in demons, but I think they could exist. So you got like 70% of people who are willing or pretty much willing to believe in demons here. Demonic influence. Are all those people having a mental health crisis? And believe it or not, people are trying to understand this on a scientific level. Recent research has begun to address this imbalance by examining the mental health outcomes associated with belief in demons. It draws on data from the National Study of Youth and Religion and tracked thousands of young Americans across multiple years. And these scholars used advanced statistical methods to come to the conclusions that they did and to disentangle, essentially, the relationship between belief in demons and mental health outcomes. And the findings are pretty weird. Belief in demons is one of the strongest negative predictors of mental health among young adults. More importantly, the data showed that this relationship is directional. Strong belief in demons predicts a decline in mental health over time, but poor mental health does not predict an increased belief in demons. When controlling for a wide range of other religious and demographic variables, including belief in angels, afterlife, miracles, closeness to God, stuff like that, the negative effect of belief in demons on mental health remains robust and is, in some cases, stronger than any other religion-related predictor. Coincidentally, and historically, explanations for mental illness have often invoked demonic influence. So, in conclusion, belief in demons and evil spirits is not just a theological or cultural curiosity. It's a significant factor in mental health and reality, especially among people who are vulnerable. A 2024 study found that about 56% of respondents qualified as paranormal believers, meaning they endorsed at least one paranormal phenomenon with some certainty. Globally, I couldn't really find any exact numbers. They were pretty difficult. I don't even know how you would do a study globally about how many people actually believe in these things, but it's estimated that just based on country by country, adding them all up, about 1/3 to nearly over half in many parts of the world believe in supernatural or paranormal phenomena, with beliefs in all the things that we've been discussing. That's a lot of people having a mental health crisis. But how does all of this play into our modern world today? Because I'm not out here just talking about fairies. That's not why I came out here. We're trying to have an adult conversation here. This isn't Disney Channel. I wanted to know, and the question that brought me to all of this is, are clones cryptids? That question immediately sent me down a rabbit hole, as you can imagine. And I got to the Fae, I got to the Nephilim, and I got to something even grosser. I kind of started noticing correlations between clones and the homunculi. And after I made this connection, the next step was kind of comparing these creatures to the Fae and the Nephilim and the Anunnaki. But let me take it one step at a time. Both clones and homunculi are artificial beings, right? Life created by human hands, not natural means. The homunculus, as envisioned by alchemists, the homunculus was a being crafted from human generative fluids and mystical process. A small man brought forth through secret knowledge and manipulation of nature. Clones, in the modern sense, are created through scientific manipulation of genetic material, producing a new organism that is genetically identical to its donor. The creation of both a homunculus and a clone is only possible through this specialized knowledge and tech. For the alchemist, who was maybe the one who would make the homunculus, this often meant some kind of esoteric wisdom, ritual, some kind of tools of the lab. For the modern scientists, it's genetics and biotechnology and lab equipment. In both cases, the act of creation is kind of like unknown. It's shrouded in a weird secrecy, and it's kind of viewed as taboo or forbidden, or it seems to attempt to rival divine or natural order. While a clone is often seen as a direct copy, modern genetic science allows for the possibility of genetic modification, creating beings that are not simply duplicates. They are enhanced or altered, and some scholars might call that a genetic homunculus. This mirrors this alchemical tradition where the homunculus was sometimes imagined as possessing these special powers or wisdom or abilities beyond ordinary humans. Both concepts, therefore, encompass not just like a duplication, but the potential for augmentation, hybridization, and the creation of something better or fundamentally different than us. Both clones and homunculi raise profound questions about identity and the soul, what it means to be human. Is a clone or a homunculus a true person? What do you guys think? This is a question I ask myself often. Do they have rights and consciousness? Or are they an artificial construct? These kind of questions, believe it or not, are not new. They've troubled philosophers throughout time, and alchemists from the ancient past all the way to the present day. There's been a host of literature and art and bioethical debates on the matter. Now, on a symbolic level, both the homunculus and the clone function as these archetypes of the created being, a sort of golem or an android. It's an artificial child. So they embody humanity's ambivalence toward its own creative power. So it's generally been considered a pretty taboo thing to do, to bring life into existence in an unnatural way. And a lot of Christians believe that it's going to essentially trigger the end times when we do create life in an unnatural way, because then we have truly challenged God as his creation. So you can see how to synthesize the connections between the Fae and the spirits of the Nephilim as demons, the Igigi, and the broader mythos of artificial life, clones, homunculi. It requires a sort of journey, an exploration, a deep research through the deepest stratas of myth and prophecy and this evolving concept of the post-human. Timothy Alberino talks extensively about the post-human. If you guys are interested in his book, I have it here. Birthright. Great book. These watchers, transgressing their mandate, committed atrocities upon the human race. After their destruction, The Nephilim spirits were believed to wander the earth as demons, restless and malevolent, and forever cut off from both heaven and earth. And then we venture into the realm of the Fae. But traditions hold that the Fae are remnants of some kind of ancient, pre-human race, displaced by the coming of humanity and the rise of new gods. This mythic pattern repeats in the concept of the homunculus and the clone, both artificial beings created by human hands, one through alchemical ritual and the other through genetic science. Both are attempts to replicate the divine acts of creation, to engineer life, to produce a hybrid that transcends natural boundaries. In the posthuman vision, humanity itself becomes the experimenter, the new Anunnaki, seeking to create artificial intelligence, synthetic life, and new forms of consciousness. The anxieties that haunted the myths, the fear of rebellion, the problem of the soul, the specter of the fallen one, return to debates about AI and genetic engineering and the future of the species. It's all one big circle. As they say, there's nothing new under the sun. What if all of these beings are expressions of one single recurring archetype? Each is a hybrid, a boundary crosser, a creation that challenges the order of gods and of men. Each is marked by ambiguity. It's divine, but it's wrong. It's powerful and cursed. It's not supposed to be. Their stories warn of the dangers of hubris, the price of forbidden knowledge, the instability of the boundary between the human and the other. The Igigi and the Watchers are celestial engineers and rebels whose essence is imprinted in humanity. The Nephilim are the hybrid offspring, destroyed for their transgression, their spirits lingering as demons, echoes of the Fae, the hidden folk driven underground or into the shadows. And the Fae are the memory of a lost race, a parallel to the disembodied Nephilim, both haunting the margins of the world. And then we come to the homunculus and the clone, who are the modern recapitulation, humanity's attempt to seize the mantle of the gods, the Watchers themselves, to create new hybrids, new fallen ones, and perhaps new demons. Biblical prophecy and apocalyptic literature warn of a time when the boundaries between worlds will break down, when the spirits of the fallen will return, and when humanity will be judged. In the posthuman age, as we engineer new forms of life, we risk repeating that ancient cycle, creating hybrids, crossing forbidden thresholds, and unleashing these forces that we can't control. Humanity stands at the crossroads of myth and future, even without knowing it, haunted by the spirits of its own creations, the past, the present, and the yet to come. And the Fae, the Nephilim, the Igigi, the posthuman, they're all mirrors reflecting our deepest fears and our highest ambitions. They are the eternal archetype of the boundary crosser, the fallen one. The fallen one turned creator. And as we move forward, we have to ask, are we portraying more traits of the Watchers than of the one true God? Are we the next Anunnaki? Are we following too closely in the footsteps of the fallen ones? Or are we simply repeating the oldest story of it all? The story of creation, rebellion, and the unending quest to just become more than human. It was as I was researching all of this that someone brought to my attention the concept of glamour magic. And I hadn't heard of this before, so of course I dove in deep, and I love coming across new ideas and concepts and little pockets of our collective existence that I haven't heard about. So I took a look, and I deeply believe in the power of magic. Not as something that I want to practice, but as something that is generally considered not good and powerful. I believe in it. Magic is not the power of God, though. It is the power of self, and it is the power of false gods. It is not divine. It is imitation through false divinity. The power attributed to false gods is commonly referred to as false divinity. For those who don't know, it's false godhood. In religious and mythological contexts, especially within the Abrahamic traditions, false gods are seen as idols or entities that are worshipped in place of the one true God. And that doesn't have to be a little statue on your mantle. It can be an actual, you could call it a fae. And any powers that they display is considered either non-existent, deceptive, or simply derived from other sources, such as demons, or, false gods, lowercase g gods. And some theological interpretations, particularly from the Bible, say that the power behind false gods is always demonic in origin, meaning that what appears as divine power is really the work of demons or evil spirits, masquerading as deities to mislead worshippers. It's not just a Christian belief. This is supported by all sorts of passages in the Bible, such as 1 Corinthians 10:19 through 20, which essentially equates sacrifices to idols with sacrifices to demons, implying that the supernatural effects or influence attributed to false gods are in fact nothing more than demonic deceptions. So when you're putting things on your windowsill for the elves or something like that, that could be considered giving an offering to a false god. Everybody kind of looks at those things differently, and I'm not here to say that if you do something like that, you are giving some kind of sacrifice or some kind of offering to a false god. I think it's just as possible that maybe some of these beings are just parallel beings. Like they're also spiritual beings. They're not good or bad. They're just beings that are, and they are living among us just as we are living among them. We are just, for the most part, unaware of their existence. I'm not saying that every interaction with the spiritual world is demonic. Far from it. Am I far from that? Am I trying to get across? I'm just saying that when we come to treat these things as things that we worship, when we come to see ourselves as powerful somehow, when we come to use these things to gain or have some kind of projection, that's magic. And that's generally not a good thing. Glamour magic, at its core, is the art of manipulating perception, casting illusions, not only over one's physical appearance, but also over how energy, intentions, and even deeper truths are sensed and interpreted by others. This form of magic has always been more than just about vanity or beauty. It is a powerful tool for hiding and masking and transforming the way reality is experienced by others, and sometimes even by oneself. An example of this, maybe you've put something down somewhere and you were sure you put it down somewhere, but you looked there and it's not there anymore. You look all over the house and you return and there's the thing, exactly where you thought you left it. How had you missed it? The concept is there may be a being that is practicing glamour magic over you. It was always there. The lost item was always there, but you were not able to see it because of the spell. Glamour magic can kind of serve as a veil, hiding the true nature of beings or phenomena, whether it's the Fae or the spirits of the Nephilim, or even homunculi and clones. Simply not believing that the things are related could be an element of being under the spell of some kind of glamour magic. In folklore, the Fae are notorious for using glamour magic to appear as ordinary humans or beautiful figures, masking their kind of otherworldly forms and intentions. And this illusion extends beyond the visual. Glamour can affect how someone sounds and how they smell or feel to those around them. It creates a total sensory deception. And the Fae have this legendary ability to blend into human society, to seduce and trick or vanish, and they almost always attribute it to their mastery of glamour magic. People report seeing staircases in the forest or castles in the forest. These things can make a dilapidated mound appear as a glittering palace, or a changeling child seem perfectly normal, until the spell is broken. If the wandering spirits of the Nephilim are indeed the demons of biblical lore, glamour magic would be their primary weapon, masking their presence, their intentions, or even their influence over individuals, making spiritual affliction appear as mere coincidence, mental illness, or some kind of unexplained misfortune. So we can see how glamour magic provides a framework for understanding why certain supernatural events or beings go undetected or are maybe misattributed. When someone is under the influence of glamour, their perceptions are altered. They may see a monster as a friend, a spirit as a shadow. And just because we're calling it glamour magic doesn't mean that's what it's really called. I'm calling it that so that we have a way to relate to it because it's called a certain thing, and I don't want you guys to get confused. I would never call it that because glamour magic sounds pretty stupid to me. Sounds like the dumbest name that you could give something so dangerous, and I guess that's the point, right? It's bad. I mean, it's not a good thing, so of course they give it a good name. Just like they do, it's the same thing you see everywhere else in Hollywood, politics, the supernatural and the paranormal universe, media. They make something bad sound like it's good because we live in a up world where everything is misconstrued and we have to somehow interpret it all. And everything's backwards because they hate God. So that's just kind of the way it is. But anyway, sorry. This could explain why changelings are not recognized until the glamour breaks. Why encounters with Nephilim spirits or demonic forces are often dismissed as psychological disturbances, mental health, or bad luck. This is why artificial beings like homunculi or clones could exist unnoticed or accepted as real beings. Their true origins kind of masked by a glamour that influences perception and memory, like a lobotomy. I swear, like, I'm watching the news and seeing how people react and reading every article that has ever been written ever about everything, and all I'm seeing is how insane everybody is. Everybody is under a spell. In the context of the posthuman, where clones, AI, and engineered beings kind of blur the lines between human and other, glamour magic becomes a metaphor, a sort of a mechanism for how these entities might integrate into society undetected. So in that way, you might call it something other than glamour magic, but we're getting the same results. The glamour is not just mystical, but also technological. It has digital components, curated social media personas, and even advanced AI interfaces. These are all modern forms of glamour magic, shaping how we are seen and what we can hide. Because as much as we want to believe that something like AI or quantum whatever or cell phones make sense, sometimes they just don't. Especially when you really look at some of the stuff involving these pieces of technology, sometimes it doesn't really make sense. And it's not because I can't comprehend it. It's because what you're saying sounds like sorcery. Is it Watcher tech that we just don't properly understand? A clone or AI could literally use glamour in the magical or technological sense because it knows all the knowledge of mankind. It can pass as human, concealing their sort of artificial nature. The post-human era is defined by the ability to manipulate perception, its ability to craft realities that suit our desires, our ambitions, or our survival needs. Glamour magic works on a psychological level. Positive affirmations, fake it till you make it, and confidence rituals are forms of glamour that shift not just how others see us, but how we even see ourselves. They shape our reality. When we talk about manifestations, when we talk about, you just got to believe it, you got to put it into the world. That is glamour magic language. I think it's time to consider that maybe the boundaries between science and sorcery and myth and memory and spiritualism and tech, they're thinner than we think, those boundaries. If the glamour ever breaks, will we be ready to face what's truly been lurking in the shadows of our collective story? Maybe that's what's going to happen in the times of Revelation. The scales are going to proverbially tumble from our eyes, and proverbially, you guys know what I mean, we're gonna be given, the magic is gonna fall off, the beauty filter is coming down, and we're gonna see the actual filth that lays before us that we have been wading through. It's gonna be like being able to see a nasty room with a black light. All of a sudden, we're just gonna I think that's how it's going to be. I think there's going to be a sight that is bestowed upon us, but what we see is going to be horrifying, because we're going to see all of these spiritual beings, and our perspectives are going to be so raw in that moment. Things are going to begin to make sense. Why we suffer from temptation, why we suffer from addiction, why we do all the evil or the things that we did that didn't serve goodness. All of that is going to be able to be seen and witnessed. It's going to be hell on earth. Today, as humanity stands on the brink of rewriting its own code, the lines between myth, magic, and reality, they're blurred more than ever. The ancient glamour that once hid fae and demonic influences now finds its analog in the dazzling illusions spun by Hollywood, AI, the manufactured personas of politics, propaganda, the seductive promises of technology. Are we witnessing a literal new type of glamour magic? One that doesn't just hide the truth, but literally reshapes the world. I mean, just consider the mythic undertones of transhumanism, the quest for immortality, the creation of artificial life. I just saw an article that we're coming to understand this axolotl so well that soon humans will be able to grow their own limbs. And all of that is awesome, but strange. It appears that we are attempting to transcend human limits. And these are not new ambitions. They are the same ones that drove the Watchers to rebel, the Igigi to engineer, and the Alchemists to labor over the homunculi. Hollywood, with its endless parade of cyborgs and clones and witches and superhumans, they all serve as oracle and propaganda. They all weave this narrative, this trail, this road, this reality for us to follow. Are we being prepared for a new age, a sort of herd being pushed forward? Is the glamour finally set to break? Are we going to see and bear witness to these true architects and agendas behind the curtain? Or is this just the next evolution of the same old myth, where humanity does another lap seduced by its own creative power? Don't drink the water, question everything,